I'm Fredrik Gerten, and I'm the filmmaker.
And I'm Leilani Farha, and I'm the advocate.
So, hello over there in Ottawa. How is life?
Life is busy.
Yeah,
lots going on.
I'm here in Malmö, Sweden, and everything is soft and nice, and nobody's stressing anywhere, so it's good.
That's so sweet.
But I'm happy that you keep working. You are a hardworking woman. You're really, you're the special one. You've been the UN Special Rapporteur for 6 years, working your ass off, and now you're the global director for the shift. So has your workday shifted in some way? No.
It's this pandemic, I think, has caused lots of problems for housing and homeless people. So my work is ongoing, but also because the shift, everyone loves the shift. A lot of people want to be part of the shift. So I have to be busy growing it.
Good. So yeah. we're proud. So what are we going to talk about today in our PUSHBACK Talks?
Can I say the title?
Yes.
Yeah. Shoot the messenger to kill the message. It's pretty heavy.
It's heavy. It's because it's about crisis management. It's about shifting the focus away from stories that should be told.
That's right.
In our time in history, the techniques of shifting away the focus from the real stories are like so strong. I think the whole existence of Trump is a whole, he's so good at making people talk about him. Even the people who hate him talk about him instead of talking about the real issues that we should talk about, like climate change.
That's right. He's ushered in a whole new era of changing the message, changing the narrative, and keeping it where he wants it to be. He's a master. He is a master at that.
In 2016, there was the year he was campaigning for the presidency. That was like the first year we could really measure that was a real climate change. The same year that he was running that campaign, the reporting in American TV about global warming went down 66% in the US TV. Remarkable. So when people were talking about the skin color of Donald Trump, we stopped talking about the climate. So we should remember this. If we want to change the world, we have to stay focused.
That's right. Indeed. Anything going on with our friends Oatly?
I don't really know what happens inside Oatly. I think they're in some kind of bigger brand crisis because they built the love and passion for the brand with people who actually want to change the world. And then suddenly when Blackstone becomes a major owner of them, and also the big Chinese companies becoming big owners, the whole identity of the company is like going down.
Right.
But now, and I noticed that some of my tweets and our podcast, the podcast we made about Blackstone, it's shooting up. It's so many listeners. So people are really looking for arguments to understand what the hell is going on. Why our friends at Oatly, why are you doing this? And of course, people want to know who's Blackstone.
Yeah,
because it's also, this is like this kind of a brand that is, it's actually the biggest company on the planet, but we don't really know who they are.
Blackstone, you mean? Yeah.
Blackstone, not Oatly.
Absolutely.
Blackstone.
No. Oatly, so small.
Yeah,
Little did they know what would happen
Yeah.
when they made a deal with the devil.
Sad story.
Fredrik, what listeners may not know about you is that you have had in your history a big encounter on the very issue of shifting narratives when you go after a certain brand. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
In 2009, I was premiering a film called Bananas. Bananas is a film where we follow a lawsuit in Los Angeles where banana workers from Nicaragua are suing DOLE. DOLE is the biggest fruit company on the planet, and they also have 25% of the world banana market. But they were suing them for the use of a banned pesticide that made the workers sterile. So I was following this court case, and when we released the trailer, it took 24 hours, and we received a cease and desist letter from Dole saying, stop the film, take down the website, take down the trailer, go away, don't show anything more. And we were selected to, one of 7 films to compete at the LA Film Festival, $50,000 in reward. We were so happy. And boom, I thought, I actually honestly thought, wow, now I will have some really powerful friends, taking this struggle together with Hollywood will come on my side.
Did you really think that? You really thought that?
I'm Swedish. We are naive people, We believe that people can be good. And of course, what happened? Not. No.
And?
Dole had a PR company. This PR company had made a strategy. And the strategy was to point at the main character of my film, a Cuban-American lawyer, to say he was a crook. He had bribed the witness, the workers, everybody was lying. And they were selling that story to the media. And it was so big success. So I arrived to LA defending myself towards journalists who hadn't seen my film. So whenever they interviewed me, say, have you seen the film? Doesn't matter. You're lying in the film. No. Please watch the film. No. So they got so much attention, and they really made me they put me in a defensive seat. It was really scary.
I can only imagine. I have lots of questions for you, but one thing that's super cool that you did was you then made a film about being sued by Dole called Big Boys Gone Bananas, which just every time I hear the title, it just makes me laugh. It's such a clever title.
Because they went bananas, totally. I mean,
they went totally bananas.
I guess when I was about to go to the U.S., what will happen? I don't know. They will probably, give me a lawsuit in my hand at some moment. So I think the only way I can protect myself is having a camera team around me all the time, so that we at least can get the papering on film. So
I suppose
it started like a little, I didn't really know what that film were going.
Right.
But then later on, I understood that this film was not about to be about Dole. It should actually be a film about how do big companies do when they want to shift the focus away from a bad story. I said crisis management. Every PR company on the world, they have on the services list is crisis management. And that means a crisis is a report from scientists saying that there is poison in this, you can get cancer. It can be this salad is grown on occupied territories in Palestine. It can be many different things. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you need to handle this. It can also be an NGO publishing a report on something. It can be a UN special rapporteur saying a story. And then you will get crisis management. And that's very much a 24/7 service. And then you get really skilled, smart people up against you. So it's for you working by yourself and me working like a very small team. It's really hard to handle. But I think we should listen to one clip from the film. What do you say?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Dole Foods is suing a Swedish filmmaker for wanting to show a fraudulent documentary slamming the company.
I think you're being a little bit naive if you think that you can take a pop at a big multinational and expect to walk away without some sort of fight on your hands.
I want to say I'm not connected with Dole in any way, but I do object to the antics of publicity-hungry filmmakers like Gerton.
They spend millions on their brand every year, and you're going to come in and start sullying their brand and start attacking their brand. What did you think was going to happen?
But you, as a producer, have a duty to the truth. Scary moments. I mean, the last part of this is actually an anonymous letter sent to my producer, Margaret Youngard, and they basically advised her to distance herself from me.
Yes. Crazy. I mean, that's a divide and conquer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when Dole sued us, they sued me personally, Margaret personally, and the company.
Yeah.
So they really tried, and then they didn't sue our co-producers and others. So they kind of isolated us like a little group under a lot of stress, but still tried to divide within us. Really smart and scary, but they were not successful.
In that clip, we hear this expert saying, you took on a major multinational. You took a shot at them or something, he says. What did you think would happen? And I want to put that question to you. When you were making Bananas, did it cross your mind as a filmmaker that you would be put in this position of being basically, assaulted by this multinational, and that undermined, and that they would try to stop your film from getting out? Like, did that cross your mind?
To be honest, not. So maybe I'm stupid, maybe I'm naive, but
naive.
in that courtroom where we were following the case, LA Times was there, Bloomberg was there. There was a lot of other journalists reporting the same story. Right. So I didn't think they would come after us. Just they sued us because they wanted to scare us away, of course, but they wanted to show some other people around that don't mess with us, because then we will smack you. I don't know. A part of this lawsuit was also the story they sold to the media.
Exactly.
And that story was so successful.
Well, we heard it in the clip. I actually found it shocking listening to that clip. I think it's from CTV, a Canadian television news company, where in his lead sentence, he refers to your documentary as a fraudulent documentary. That had not been determined by anyone but whom? Dole. That was Dole's messaging. Yeah. And I have to say, Fredrik, before doing the podcast, I just did a little search. I just wanted to see what was out there. I'd never actually, believe it or not, in our many years now of friendship, I actually had never Googled this issue just to see what narrative was out there at the time. And I was shocked. Headline after headline, news story after news story, and not just in Canada, but certainly in the States.
All over the world, also in Latin America, in Spanish.
Yeah. Dole's narrative won, basically.
It was a well-told story. They created a story about a fraudulent lawyer and a sloppy filmmaker. It was like a funny story. Yeah. So this Canadian morning host, for him it was like a joke. It was like a fun story to tell your friends at dinner about. Have you heard about this filmmaker? He made a film, blah, blah, blah. This do-gooders. So it was really successful, and we were totally taken by, we had no idea this was happening.
Right. One of the things that I really love about Big Boys Gone Bananas is it actually is, it's very much about your experiences with Dole, but it is a microcosm of a thing that happens out there, that happens to a lot of human rights defenders, a lot of people just trying to tell the truth or a truth. And I'm interested to know, what tactics did they use against you specifically? And had you anticipated that they would come after you in the way that they did? Obviously they were telling a story, but I think there were other tactics. You mentioned the divide and conquer.
There were so many different parts of it. First one was that they actually contacted every journalist that interviewed me. So they were calling journalists personally.
Right.
So a lot of Swedish journalists got calls. Even smaller outlets got calls from Dole, and then all over the world. So that was like, and they were really friendly. I won't compare this with Oatly, but Oatly is doing this friendly thing. They are contacting people, selling their version of it in a friendly way and in a very nice way, and that's fine, because they're still nice people. Of course, then we have this covert things that we don't really know. The anonymous letters. Somebody following me in Twitter, and the tag is "follow you in LA." It's like
oh my God.
I had a lot of this kind of scary stuff, and then of course they bought my name on Google. So
what do you mean?
On Google you can buy an ad name.
Right.
You can buy DOLE, you can buy Blackstone,
Right.
and then, but if you buy a big name, it will be extremely expensive. But if you buy my name, it's probably quite cheap as an ad word.
What's the impact of that? Like they buy your name and then...
It meant that whenever somebody was typing my name, there will be an ad from DOLE coming up really high up. So it meant even on our own trailer, on YouTube, on Vimeo, there was a DOLE ad coming after us. And they kept that for 2 years. So when LA Times had an interview with me, there was a DOLE ad coming up, on the page.
Wow.
That's what you can do with money.
Yeah.
And we could never turn it around.
Right.
We couldn't buy their name, So it's a very unfair way of handling it. And then of course there was one of the biggest Swedish daily, Dagens Nyheter. They had this commentary track. They don't have it so much anymore, but a commentary track under articles. And they had a special firm handling in this because, they have to kick out things that are against the law. But that company said, here is something going on which is an organized thing. So that's what you call Astroturfing. They actually, you have like fake brand advocates, fake advocates who are out writing. And you can, if you know a little bit about, you can see the talking points. Because all PR people, they work with talking points. So you can see it's coming again and again and again. So it's fraudulent lawyer, and here in the Swedish media, the film wasn't out. So nobody in Sweden had seen the film.
Right.
But then the talking point was very much about scenes from the film.
Oh, interesting.
So
talk about seizing the narrative. I mean, completely seizing the narrative. Amazing.
But it wasn't so successful in my country, though. Yeah.
No, it wasn't. But before we get there, I just want to ask you, you yourself, before being a documentary filmmaker, were a long-time journalist. And I'm interested to know what you think about the role of journalists in this. Do they have any control? How much control do they have? We could maybe play a clip from the film. I think we have a clip about that issue. Yeah.
The thing that was most surprising about the media coverage of the suit that came out against you was how easily you were a fraud and DOLE was wronged and the banana company was fighting for justice. And no reporter should ever take that at face value. We have an astounding lack of curiosity on the part of the journalism community in the U.S., a lack of skepticism. These journalists failed in their job. They took a press release and reprinted it, basically. They didn't do any due diligence, and that is even more shameful than the film festival disavowing you.
We have a media that is corrupted by power, mostly by corporate power. You have corporate ownership from the top. You have corporate advertising coming in from the side. We have a media that is where advertising and money and corporate influence is really the mother's milk.
The reality is that the media is much more willing to take down stories when a company comes to them and say, listen, don't write that story now because you're going to look stupid. And we will go out with a massive denial and we'll go after your media organization as well. I know of global corporations in the US who have threatened to pull advertising from the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, because they don't like the editorial coverage. So there isn't as much investment in investigative journalism as there was in the past. Journalism itself is under threat.
Journalism itself is under threat. There was Tim Burt. He's a strategic and reputational expert in London. He's a former Financial Times reporter, but as he says in the film, he went over to the dark side. I met these people. Also, the other guy, Sven Hughes, who is also a former British military, also told me about how they operate. Because when a big company like Blackstone or DOLE, when they want to go to fight something, they bring in the best people, of course, and then all these firms, they have different kind of experts and different kind of networks, So it's also a way of they can pull many strings, It's scary.
I find that the concept that journalists are in the thick of it, in fact, part of the harm rather than part of uncovering the harm. I find that so alarming. I because in my own work, I have to admit, I use journalists a lot to get the truth out there. I mean, my narrative is not a narrative that people want to listen to, that people care to listen to. It's not mainstream. Housing is a human right. Who gives a hoot? And so I rely on journalists a lot. And here's a story and a message to me, remember that in some instances, the corporate control of media is going to be problematic.
And of course, it's not every day. It's not every day, because what happens to us when Dole went after us, they're so strong and they went after us with so much aggression. So like the LA Times, I talked to writers there who really wanted to do my story, our perspective and, to actually watch the film. But then the in-house structure said, no, we're not doing this. Even The Guardian actually interviewed me. And I told the reporter, who was then his South American correspondent, told him that this angle you're putting on is not the correct angle. You should open it up. This angle is created by DOLE Food Company. And he said, no, my lawyers will never accept this, so we will have to run with this angle. The legal departments of these newspapers, they're really scared.
Yeah.
And they are also lawyers, and the lawyers are always there to minimize the risks all the time, to protect the corporations. The newspapers. It's understandable, but it has an effect on the freedom of speech and the freedom of press, which is severe. So
Absolutely.
and that's and I would say also that's why documentary films sometimes play a very important role, or bloggers, or that kind of. I mean, we talked in one episode. We talked about the blogger in Malta who got killed, Daphne.
Yes.
Remember?
Yes.
There were Malta. There's two major newspapers. One is for the one party, and the other is for the other party. And so she made a blog, so she could actually do what she wanted to do all the time. That platform of the blog became extremely powerful because nobody was controlling it. So and sometimes a documentary film has the same power also, which is interesting.
You mentioned bloggers, and in fact, I thought that was interesting too in your situation. It was a blogger in, I think, Malmö, who, where you're living, who helped to bring down Dole in a way. At least that's how the documentary makes it seem. Can you talk about him? He's super cool.
When Dole sued us, the cease and desist letter came in May. You know the day because it's your birthday, you said before here.
May 8th.
May 8th. We got the cease and desist letter. The actual lawsuit came after we've been to Los Angeles, and it became, early July. July is like holiday month. Nobody's working, and I tried to get attention for it. It was so hard to move. It was really hard to move. There was people, going into the supermarket say, we don't want to buy Dole bananas. They're suing Swedish filmmakers. But the story didn't really take off until this blogger, he went into a hamburger chain here in Malmö, which is called Max Hamburgers, which have branded themselves, for having Swedish values. So it's more the climate, more climate aware. I mean, how climate aware hamburgers can be, I don't know, but they were selling themselves. They were selling themselves as a very green and responsible alternative. Right. So he wrote to them a letter and said, you have all these good values. How can you sell a fruit salad from Dole, who is suing a Swedish filmmaker? And then the CEO of the company answers, oh, you're right. From tomorrow we will take away all Dole fruit salads.
Amazing.
And that was for them, it was no business. It was nothing. It was it didn't cost anything of their core business.
Right.
But then he published that on his blog. I saw it. I sent it to some other journalist, and boom, it took off.
Right.
And then there was a story, a big hamburger chain boycotting Dole, and then the business journalists, which are the most important journalists in some cases, they called the supermarkets and say, okay, so they are boycotting Dole, what are you going to do? And you know,
Right.
in every supermarket, bananas is 1% of the sales of one shop. And this goes for Canada, for the US, almost for all over the world. It's like, it's an extremely, profitable product. It doesn't seem so because it's in a corner, but talk to people who work in supermarkets. They're filling them up all the time. It's extremely good business, and it's all done, produced by exploited labor and with killing the nature environment totally in a very. So I mean, but for the supermarkets, they don't want to lose that business. So this really changed the story here in Sweden. And this was actually just before we were showing the film in the Swedish Parliament. And of course, I also, when I talked to the parliamentarians, I talked to one MP from the Conservative Party and one from the Social Democrats. So it was actually the two biggest party in the parliament.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want Dole to be able to frame me.
Right.
They were trying in their Astroturfing and everything to frame me as a communist. Like they always try to frame you in some way.
Yes.
And so we managed to avoid and say, like, freedom of speech, freedom of press is not about being right-wing or left-wing. It's like the fundamental thing of a democracy.
I mean, I love the story for a bunch of reasons. The blogger in particular, because, I mean, though he was a blogger, I mean, he's just an average guy. When you see him on the screen, just an average guy. And he walks into a burger joint and he doesn't like what's happening. And he makes his voice heard. And he's just one guy, and it triggers this whole thing, which I think is super important for people to realize. It does make a difference to voice your values and to make your values known, which I think is what Oatly is experiencing right now, where people are like, whoa.
It's interesting because I started to write a tweet and a Facebook commentary about this, and then the newspaper here in Malmö called, do you want to write a story? And I said, oh yeah, I can do it. Well, I
about
guess
the Oatly thing.
Yeah, I guess I have to write a story because I know a little bit more about Blackstone than others do. So it was my
your responsibility.
And now, I told you last weekend it took off in the UK. So now I have influencers with a lot of followers who are posting about our podcast, and everybody's listening. And people, I mean, there's a lot of engaged people out there who really want to do something. And this story pisses people off, or people also get really sad because they're losing a friend, because Oatly has been a friend for a lot of people. So but it's interesting that that one story suddenly can change it, and that's complicated for people like Blackstone, and so they don't really know how to handle that. They can control a lot of other things. And most of the things on this planet is always going their way because they have all the power to do so. Through, they are supporting political candidates. They are fighting. We know, for example, now in California there is last election there was a proposition about rent control.
That's right.
And there will be a new one now coming up.
That's right. Proposition 21 is the new one. And Blackstone's sinking millions of dollars in the no campaign. In other words, to
fight rent control. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. I mean, Blackstone is an interesting case, Fredrik, because I mean, we've had some pushback from Blackstone since Push was released. Maybe you want to talk a bit about that. We haven't had a torrent. They haven't tried to shut us down, but we've had some pushback. I think it's interesting the way they've approached it. They
contacted the Swedish consulate in New York, general consulate, when we were showing the film in New York. They contacted the Swedish broadcaster. They contacted the Swedish Parliament when we showed the film in the Swedish Parliament. They contacted the German and French broadcasters, and so on. So they are, and whenever they are doing that, they're doing that through some kind of PR company. So right. They're using that kind of. So they. And of course, they create some kind of stress, but then these broadcasters we work with are still public broadcasters. They are actually still, they have values, and they don't want to be fooled around by big corporations. So it still works. But it might be more complicated in the US, for example.
That's right.
I mean, the film has been on TV in Canada, but not in the US yet. So you never know.
That's right.
What is behind a no somewhere, you know?
No, I think that's right. It might get more complicated. And I mean, they did the usual stuff trying to undermine my credentials, and she's just a nobody and doesn't really even have a position with the UN, even though was the UN rapporteur. I do know that there's a book out there that people ought to read called Home Wreckers by a fellow named Aaron Glantz. And Aaron and I have become friendly because we obviously have mutual interest. Obviously, a book about the wrecking of homes would interest me. He actually, in his book, goes into some detail about the way in which Blackstone used the global financial crisis to make a huge amount of money and really has caused misery for so many households and families, and goes into some depth, some real stories of the harm Blackstone has caused. Aaron has been targeted by Blackstone. They have tried to shut him down. So maybe when Push is released in the US, we will have to be prepared for some other treatment by them. Who knows?
I hope not, because I think it's the lesson that, I mean, you should actually, friends, you should watch Big Boys Come Bananas, because it's an interesting story. Because in the end, DOLE Food Company lost a lot of business. Here in Sweden, fair trade bananas went from 5% of the market to over 50%. So it totally shifted the market in a very radical way. And Dole had a big problem to getting their bananas sold in this country for a long time. So it can also be a mistake going after a film. Sometimes, and I think that's probably how Blackstone reasoned. They don't want to give us any extra attention.
Yeah, that might be right.
That's always there's some risk connected to that.
Yeah, I think that's true. I really love in Big Boys, and I agree. Actually, everyone should see Bananas and Big Boys and see them together. It's an amazing ride.
I have a suggestion here, because the films, all our films you can be found on Vimeo on demand through our website wgfilm.com, and then you can find our films. But we will now have, for everybody who's listening to this, if you put in the discount PUSHBACK, and then you will get a 25% discount. So you can actually watch the films now.
Nice offer.
Pushback.
I think we should throw in some conditions. You have to listen to PUSHBACK Talks, give us a 5-star review, give to our Patreon account.
And
then you get Patreon.
We actually have Patreon people helping us now. Thank you for all Patreons out there. We're a little bit embarrassed. It's cool. And tell us, we still don't know how to pay back. You have to give us suggestions how we should do something that will make you extra proud to be a patron. But I mean, to all of you out there, it's done without any budget, which is a little bit stressful in the long run. But so the thing you can do for us now is, of course, put some money into the Patreon account. But you can also just spread the news about our podcast. Tell your friends. Tweet about it, Facebook about it, whatever you do with people. Call them. Say they should listen to this.
No one calls anyone anymore.
No, but I honestly believe that if we want to change the world, we have to do that with knowledge. And we are trying to, we are kind of good at drinking wine and having fun also, but this podcast is more about getting knowledge out. And as you are a global expert on a lot of stuff, I think your voice is so important to get out. So that's
knowledge is power. Knowledge is power.
It is, actually.
That's why they try to shut us down.
Yeah. But this, we talked about shifting the focus. I have to say one thing that is really interesting. Yeah. In 2008, we've been talking about 2008, the Great Recession, the big financial crisis. When that went down, I felt, okay, finally people will understand how irresponsible the banks are, the financial market. Finally, we will regulate them. We will find a way to force them to be more responsible. And now what PUSH is about is that the financial crisis 2008 made guys like Blackstone 10 times stronger. And they took over the worst guys in 2008 are the ones who are now owning our homes.
Yes.
They didn't own our homes before 2008. They do it now. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that's a little bit also about all these crisis management, all the lobbying coming in. How do we solve the crisis? How do we get the nations up going again? Here in Europe, everybody talked about Greece. Oh, it's Greece. The Greeks are irresponsible. You know, that was the big talk. So they shifted the focus away from the banks and made us all talk about a lovely country with moussaka and Retsina wine, you know? and they kind of suddenly they were the guilty guys for all the suffering. And then they sold to many nations. They said, okay, you can get some money from IMF or the European Central Bank, but then you have to cut public funding. You have to you have to liberalize your market. You have to open up your housing sector for external investors.
Yes.
So the measures to save the economy was extremely, let's call it neoliberal. Mm-hmm. So they actually through their lobbying, they changed the rules of the game even more in their favor. Mm-hmm. So and we should remember this in this pandemic and all the packages going out now, that the people who are most active are these guys. So let's listen to this clip where we can understand how big money is operating in how to change opinions out there. I now understand that I'm up against a huge machine employing scare tactics, media control, PR spin, and dirty tricks.
These lobbying and public relation firms provide a variety of services. Among the services that some of these firms provide is to actually plant opinion pieces, or what we call op-eds, in American newspapers. They have people on staff who do nothing but sit around all day and write up an opinion piece. Then they'll go out to a think tank or to a university and recruit someone there with a big name to put their name on the piece. And then they will plant the piece in an American newspaper.
That was Ken Silverstein, former New Yorker journalist, who made some amazing. He did a very cool story where he said to big PR firms in Washington that he represented a gas company from the former Soviet Union, and he wanted their help to pitch to the U.S. to sell them well.
Right.
So he went, and they bought into it. So they came and pitched their abilities to him. So amongst this was we can get professors to sign in for you and so on. So it was a country that needed to get a better image in Washington D.C. So you can look at Ken Silverstein's writing. It's an amazing story.
This idea makes me so mad. I fight hard to get my opinion pieces in newspapers, and other people are buying their opinions in. It's so interesting.
They
to
get
me.
paid to do.
They get paid to do it.
To
That's
put their name on it.
I mean, it's amazing to me. But it also, I'm an advocate, as we know, and I'm always trying to figure out how to be better at my job. And the whole idea of the shift was to try to claim some narrative space at a global level, to say there's a different story to be told about housing. And so just thinking this through, it's like, wow, look at what we are up against, right? Their machinery has tentacles everywhere, right into paying people to write op-eds that get published in papers that I'm scrambling around and pleading and begging to get into, right?
Yeah. But I think, overall, we as a general public, first of all, we shouldn't be afraid to tell the story. Freedom of speech and freedom of press is in our constitution, so we have to use it. You asked me if I wasn't scared. We cannot be scared. We have to keep telling important stories. And we also should know there is a lot of smart, cool people out there listening to us and taking part and also sharing these stories. So I think we should all keep sharing important stories, voices of people, and stop sharing stupid things. Stop sharing whatever Trump or Bolsonaro says, because it's always juicy, but it's supposed to be juicy. So we should keep talking about our things. I mean, also now we're talking about the U.S. election. Everybody talks about the ratings of Trump and Biden. Let's focus on what happens on the streets in the U.S. What happens in the homes. That's almost like the untold stories. Why are people so angry? We actually have an episode. One of our early episodes here in the podcast is about why people are so angry. We should talk about the real stuff. But we should probably keep doing that in a new episode.
I think that's right.
We're running
talking
over time.
Too much.
Yeah.
That's right.
So anyway, so my films, Bananas and Big Boys Gone Bananas, can be found on wgfilm.com. And so then there is a Vimeo links, and then if you put in Pushback, and then you will get some discount. If you have some troubles doing that, write to us, pushback@wgfilm.se. Pushback@wgfilm.se. Write to us. You can also tweet us. Tweet me, Fredrik Gert, and tweet the dear advocate, Leilani Farah. And you can there's also Push the Film. There is maketheshift.org. There's all these resources, and let's keep fighting. Let's keep talking.
Okay, I'll do.
Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
And I'm sorry for you that you have so much work all the time, because and also the 6-hour time difference is complicated, because now I can go out for a glass of wine and you have to keep working.
And I have to face the day.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
That's
my
your
job.
problem. That's your problem. Yeah. But talk soon. And
Talk soon, Fredrik.
and stay strong, because we need you.